So the other day I caught heat on Twitter, as I normally do. Twitter is a surij stamkoko. I basically wrote a tweet that said the Zulu Nation / kingdom is like 10 years older than the Afrikaner Nation. They almost the same age. The Zulu Nation is 209 years old. The Afrikaner Nation is 191 years old. People lost their minds. Zulu people came for me. Afrikaners as well came for me. Zulus were like, when you said you're no longer Zulu, you must shut up. Hey, Untando AfriForum, nan. Hey, whatever, man. Afrikaans people are like, no, it's much older than that. You don't have your facts straight, whatever. It's chilled. So the reason I'd said this was because I'd done a bit of research. And one of the things you must understand when we share this stuff is that it was captured by human beings. No different from me and you. So if you feel you have superior information, better information, different information, please share it so we can all learn together and grow together and have real history. We fight over so many things in this country today, and you realize that sometimes the base of our fights, people don't even know the real history, sadly. Let me start with Afrikaners. This is going to be very quick because I actually want to speak more about the Zulu Nation and Kingdom. Many people regard the Afrikaners as starting in 1652. That would be the year, the official year that Jan van Riebeeck from the Netherlands, from the Dutch, from Holland, would come to the Cape. Now, Jan van Riebeeck was not Afrikaner. He was not an Afrikaans man. He was Dutch. And it would be for many years that himself and some of the settlers there would identify as Dutch settlers and would speak the language of Dutch. Now, many people don't know this, but it is disputed how the language came about. My understanding, my knowledge, feel free to dispute and teach us. There were indigenous black African peoples in the Cape. Remember, the Cape was a midway station for your Dutch East India Company and other shipping companies to stop, like an Ultra City, to stop, refresh, get some fresh veggies, fruits, chill out, all those good things, get fresh meat, etc., chill with the locals, have a vibe. And then they'd carry on to India to get spices, they'd go to China to get silk, and then on their way back, they'd also come Polai and then chuck back. This would be the Dutch, it would be the French, it would be the German, Flemish. They would pass by. And you must understand, these are people now speaking different languages. So in doing that, they came up with this Mkokotelo, Skova Dam, mixed masala language, which today now we call Afrikaans. And it's so easy to trace. I mean, some of the words you can see directly because the Dutch had a huge influence on the language. But there are certain words you can hear them in German. You can hear some of the words are French, etc., etc. So that's where the language itself comes from. But the people themselves, 1652, official Dutch settlers are like, Exe, we are here now, we're not chucking. We're not passing by, we're going to be here moving forward. Some would argue that the first time a human being would call themselves an Afrikaner would be in 1707. Not 1652, 1707. But that is disputed. Again, we're speaking data that is word of mouth. Yeah, I think someone said, I'm not sure. It is not a known fact that there was a group of people that said we were Afrikaners. Today, some Afrikaans people dispute that there were people that called themselves Afrikaners in the 1700s. Some from Mozambique side calling themselves Afrikaners. That's disputed again. This is from research that I've done. Feel free to share yours. The Dutch people in the Cape would have issues with the British, as per usual, because the British are always causing problems. And they would be like, say, deuces, we're going to go inland. We're not liking the vibe, Iso. We want to chuck. And they started what is known as the Great Trek. Between 12 and 20,000 people would leave on this Great Trek. This would be between 1835 and the 1840s that they would trek inland, settle in different places, have conflicts, negotiate for certain land in certain places, including with Omshweshwe, etc., etc. But from that point on, these people were no longer seeing themselves as Dutch because it was not just Dutch people in this great trek, the voortrekkers, as they were, the pioneers. These would be a group of people that would be a mixed masala of Dutch, French, German, Flemish, etc., who would come together and then start coming together to make children as well. There's arguments that some of them were even mixed with black indigenous people. Apparently, Afrikaans people, all of them, if you look at their DNA, they've got a black portion within themselves in there. So maybe we should add black as well. Outside of the supposed Khoi and San, and what we know as the Kleerling today, the colored nation, the mixed race nation that came out. But these would be the white Afrikaans people who would end up being known as the Boers, because at the time they were farming. They'd go and become voortrekkers. And later on, they would formalize and be known as Afrikaners. And when they formalized and were known as a people, that is when the Afrikaner Nation was born. To say you are Dutch means you need to go to the history of the Netherlands. To say you are German means you need to go back there. To say you are British. But this group of people that would end up getting into government under the National Party, taking over, implementing apartheid, oppressing and exploiting black people after the British had done the same. And that fight, even today, they're fighting for their schools, they're fighting for their language. Trump has said, come to America and become Amerikaners. And they're like, yeah, baba. Those are Afrikaans people. 191 years old or roundabout. Then comes my peeps, the Zulus. And people are like, yeah, baba, you couldn't sure. The Zulus have been around for longer than 209 years. I want to read this history. But before I read this history, I want to explain what came before the Zulus. The Zulus were part of a greater group of people known as the Nguni people or Abangoni, the people who commit no sin. Today, we know the Nguni people as the Zulus, majority, Amaxhosa, largely in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape. You've got the Swati people who have their own country of Eswatini, but many are also in Mpumalanga province of South Africa. And then you've got the Ndebele people who are in Mpumalanga, I think a part of Limpopo, and then some in Zimbabwe, what we call Zimbabwe today. Used to be, I think, Southern Rhodesia. You've got the Ndebele people. Zimbabwe, I think you've got the Ndebeles and the Shonas who also fight with each other. Nguni people, Abangoni, Zulu, Xhosa, Swati, Ndebele. Those people come from a greater nation. We call them today the Bantu. Bantu people. Kwantu. Ntu being debatable whether a person or a king who came from the north or where supposed life started. We could argue the DRC type area or the Ethiopias. I mean, Ethiopia is like a portal into a parallel universe. If ever they decide to make like a Marvel series on Ethiopia, because it's got the oldest Bible, it's got one of the oldest languages. The people there looks like a mix of African and Indian and European. They are just a fascinating group of people, and it's a fascinating geographical location. Where they came from there and up north, the great empire of Kemet, and then you can link some of these to the biblical figures and how they link those people. Ntu. Either a person or a king or a way of life. Ntu way of life, which is you are because I am because you are. We live in harmony with each other. We believe in karma. We are one with nature. And we became the people of Ntu, of this energy and way of living. The people of Bantu. And when you are singular, you are Muntu. When you are many, you are Bantu. Who would then trek, like the voortrekkers, who would trek south beyond the Great Lakes. And then they would split in various ways into today, what we know as Abo Tanzania, Abo Angola, Abo Zambia, Abo Zimbabwe, Malawi, etc. Of which some of the Nguni, Abangoni people, you'll find parts of them in places like Zambia, Malawi, etc. But then the Nguni would split further into Zulu, Xhosa, etc., etc. But people don't know where these things start. And today I just want to read some of the research on the Zulus. On another day, maybe I can do Amaxhosa, because Amaxhosa are also different clans that were brought together, different families that were brought together. I do not know Swati history. It would be interesting to research that as well. And along with the Ndebeles and I think Umzilikazi as their father. Let's go here. So one of the issues that people had was When I say the Zulu kingdom is 209 years old, or nation, it starts for me when Ushaka, Kasenza Ngakona, created a Zulu kingdom. And people are like, the Zulus existed way before that. I want to read this so that you understand. The Zulu were originally a minor clan in what is today northern KwaZulu-Natal, founded around 1574. This is now a different year from the year when Ushaka officialized the Zulu Nation, which is 1816, by the way. This is 1574. But they were a minor clan. Can call them / family even. Founded in 1574 by uZulu Kamalandela. Understand that we didn't have surnames as people. Or not surnames in the way we have them now, the formalized one with the birth certificate and your ID. You would have a given name, and then you would take the name of your father, your father's name. Some would argue that you would take the name of the area that you live in, or your family totem if it's an elephant, or ndlovu, or mhlampe you guys live near a huge tree, umthi, umthi mkhulu, whatever the case may be, omfula, because you were living near a great river. Or it would be your father's given name, because it would be your father's land. So then you take that and you be like, my name is uZulu, my father is uMalandela. So I am uZulu kaMalandela. In the same way, Ushaka did not have a surname. Shaka's surname was not Zulu. Kwakushaka kaSenza Ngakhona. uSenza Ngakhona was his father's name. uSenza Ngakhona kaJama. uJama being the father's name. And then you can trace that back to uZulu kaMalandela, which means uMalandela, you go further. And this is why I'm explaining the Nguni, Abangoni, the two people, etc., etc. So Zulu kaMalandela, in the Nguni languages, iZulu means heaven or weather, iZulu being the rain. At that time, the area was occupied by many large Nguni communities and clans, also called the Isizwe nation people. Sizwe is a nation. Or called Isibongo, what we now call a surname. But Isibongo is a praise or a clan. Ukubonga is to thank, so it's a praise name or a clan name, referring to their clan or family name. Nguni communities had migrated down Africa's east coast over millennia, thousands of years, as part of the Bantu migrations. As the nation began to develop, the rulership of Ushaka, about 250 years after the Zulu clan was founded, brought clans together to build a cohesive identity for the Zulu, the people of the heavens. The Zulu formed a powerful state in 1816 under the leader of Ushaka. I'm just trying to think of an analogy in my head. We have South Africa today. Now, I tell people South Africa is however many years old, and someone's like, but it existed before that. Of course, but it was not called South Africa at the time. It would be a union of South Africa under British rule, where by the decree of the Queen, I think Victoria it was, before Elizabeth, this would now be seen as British territory called South Africa. And then we're like, that's when it started. The land was here, of course. We would call it whatever we want to call it. Maybe there would be an area called KwaZulu, KwaNdwandwe, Mapungubwe, Shona Land, whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't what we call present-day South Africa today. A similar thing happens here. Because if you're going to be like, but the Zulu existed way before, we may as well call ourselves the Adam people. Because Adam is supposedly our ancestor. So we are all the people of Adam. But the nation, the kingdom itself, starts with Ushaka, who unites people beyond the small Zulu clan of uZulu kaMalandela, where he'd bring Onyambos, Omthetho, where he'd bring Omkhatshwa, Ozwide, Onxumalo, where he'd bring other people, Onqobo, Ontuli, Obuthelezi, Oshenge, and other nations into this one kingdom. Almost like South Africa with the provinces and the different races and the different cultures. You have got now a nation of Zulu with all these small clans, small families that come together under a king called Ushaka. My understanding was that uZulu kaMalandela was not a king of some kingdom that had dominated some space at any point. The Zulu formed the powerful state in 1816 under the leader Ushaka. Ushaka is the Zulu commander of the Mthethwa Empire and a successor to uTingiswayo united what was once a confederation of lordships into an imposing empire under Zulu hegemony. Shaka built a militarized system known as impi, featuring conscription, a standing army, new weaponry, regimentation, and encirclement battle tactics. Zulu expansion was a major factor of the Mfecane crushing. This was a war that depopulated large areas of southern Africa. It was during this period when Ushaka deployed an army regiment for raiding nations in the north. The regiment, which was under Umzilikazi, disobeyed Ushaka and crafted a plan to continue raiding up north, forming another dialect of Zulu language referred to as Northern Ndebele. This is now in the Zimbabwe. Another group under Zwangendaba, who was Ushaka's relative from the Gumbi clan from Opongolo, and military commander, trekked northwards, crossing the Zambezi River at Chirundu in 1835 into Zambia, setting up the Ngoni nation that extended to Malawi, Mozambique, and southern Tanzania. If you ever go to Tanzania, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, and if you go to Zimbabwe, you will hear people speaking a language that sounds like what we call present-day isiZulu today. Again, as I said, man, we share these things because it's what's written and what's researchable. If you feel you have got better information, different information, you share it so that we can bring it all together and find something that sounds relevant, that seems verifiable. The idea here is not to spit on anyone's history, anyone's culture and heritage. It's to get as close as possible to the truth so that when you speak about Ungubani, who are you? What is your root? You are not mistaken. When you're fighting with AmaXhosa, when you're fighting with AmaNdebele, when you're fighting with AmaSwati, AmaTsonga, AmaVenda, you need to understand that you guys come from the same family. You have been divided today because of a language or because a language morphed in a certain area. You are divided today because someone decided to build a border. This was an external somebody. You are divided today because you guys dress in this regalia and other people dress in others. You are divided today because this is how you treat maidens here. This is how you treat maidens there. You are divided today because boys have a rite of passage into manhood in a certain way, and this side, no, it's done in a certain way. And you're like, therefore, we're not the same people. You come from the same lineage, but understand where you deviated so that as time goes on, because as I explained, these things change. If one day, like me, you decide, I no longer want to identify as Zulu. I don't want to be under the king, present day Umisu Zulu, Ka Zwelithini. I don't bow down to the king. I do not live in the geographical area of Zulu. Maybe the language that I speak most of the time is not even that language. I speak a colonial language of English. My practices, do I put my children through Imbeleko, where I introduce them to the ancestors and I slaughter a goat, Bagogis Pandla, which is a skin and fur from the goat, and we eat the meat. Sivube, sigayu utshwala, African traditional beer of sorghum for us to drink. Do I go to Msamu, which is a sacred place where I communicate with the people that came before me by burning incense, impepo, maybe lighting candles, maybe putting something that I know they used to like, sweets or meat or certain alcoholic beverages or certain juice or whatever the case may be. I don't follow those things. I don't have urondo. I don't follow their prescriptions in various of the clans. They cut their faces. You can see the slice marks. Kona inqiti in the Ngubane and other people where the children have their pinky chopped off. And rumor, legend goes that apparently the old man may have either fought and lost a battle against Ushaka or was in conflict and they took out his eyes. And in taking out his eyes, he wanted to identify the children of his clan. And he said, please chop off the pinkies of the children so that when I touch them, I can feel that, when a ungubane or whatever the surname may be. Yes, you may see it as a barbaric act today, but I mean, girls pierce their ears. Other people get tattoos, including people like the Maori. Is that barbaric? It's an identification. Other people will perm their hair. Other people will maybe even bleach their skin or lighten their skin or stand on high heels, which is something that is painful for your ankles. but in a way of being identified in a certain way. You wear makeup, etc. So it was their way of identifying. I do not follow those things. I do not believe in the, I would call it religious or spiritual beliefs that the Zulu people would at the time. Believing in Umvelinqangi as the Almighty God and communicating to Umvelinqangi through the ancestors, the people that came before us, which is contrary to the Christians, where you've got a God, you communicate via Jesus Christ. Yes, they acknowledge angels. Then you've got others like maybe Judaism, where I think the father of Judaism is Abraham. So maybe they may call out to Abraham. Others may identify Mother Mary who birthed Jesus. Others may identify maybe the different gods of the Hindus through the Vedas. Or I do not follow that. I do not dress in Zulu attire. This is what was previously European clothing. I do not eat a Zulu diet of sorghum, or I think it's millet or something that they used to eat. People don't even know that maize, umbila, imboni, umbona, is not native to South Africa. It was brought in by people from outside. You're going to say, no, but Zulus would eat uputhu, nomipapa, nomabaphuza mahewu. That maize is not even indigenous to us here. But if you don't know this history, you miss out on learning who you actually are. Once you know who you are, once you know fundamentally who you are, ngumlotshwa, nguzitha, kantumbeza, kantanzi. Once I know who I am, and I know my lineage, ngizalwa uzwelakhe kamsongelwa, and I keep it going, I can then be like, now that I know who I am, I can decide where I'm going. Do I still want to hold on to the things of the past? Where if I impregnate a girl, ngiyahlawula. Where if I want to marry a girl, mele ngiyomlobola kubo, or mele siyomlobola siyomlotshwa ozitha. Do I put my children through this practice? Do my daughters go through the rites of passage of a young maiden who remains a virgin until she gets married? Or do I live in another world where we are modern and there's women empowerment and there's agency? And I don't want my boys and myself to be paying money to other families where children have found that they love each other and want to build a life together. Where we are not conversing in isiZulu the majority of the time. We are not eating a Zulu diet from KwaZulu-Natal. We do not even live in KwaZulu. I do not worship a MisiZulu as Bayete wena wendlovu as my superior. He is not. I see him as a king of the Zulus there, but he's not my king. I can choose how I move in the same way uShaka chose how to move. Umfana kaSenza ngakhona kaJama would go and fight under udingiswayo wakamthethwa, uNyambose. He'd become a general and he'd be like, I'm going to be a successor even though I'm not umthethwa myself. I'm from this clan here of the Zulu. But I'm going to try and unite all these nations and bring them together. And I'm going to create this thing. He decided that. Someone could have told him, hey, when uZulu stay there, why ubizwa umthetho? Why ubizwa unxumalu? Bangenapla. And he was like, no, I want to bring them in here. Kodwa akusibo abantu bethu. No, sebekuzoba abethu manje. Omthetho today can decide to break away and be like, no, we'd like to have a king of abakamthetho on their own away from uMisizulu. Same with Onxumalo and other of these lordships that they mention here. In the Xhosa nation as well, when we go through it, I think Uyinsa becomes one of the major figures. You've got, I know I'm going to mess them up and I apologize. Ompondo Mise, Amamfengu, all these clans and these names of people that have their own history of how they got their names, who do not need to be under Xhosa anymore. They may speak a similar language. Anyone who's been in the Eastern Cape will also know that if you listen to his Xhosa from the Ciskei and the Transkei, you can hear some of the nuances. Same way if you are KwaZulu, you'll hear isiZulu esiphuma Northern KZN where I'm from to isiZulu saseDurban which afesa some seBhish siyobona ukuthi hayi siyangale. You can hear ukuthi okay, there's a difference in dialect here. Bayete, bayete, balete. This is just language and how it morphs. Not slang, or it's just how we speak. And we come from somewhere. The knowing where we come from, Marcus Garvey speaks about a people without knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. Know where you come from so that you are rooted in your heritage and lineage. But be strong enough and brave enough and say that there is nothing superior about uShaka kaSenza ngakhona. There is nothing superior about uZulu kaMalandela. There is nothing superior with uCyril Ramaphosa, uJacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma. There is nothing superior with the Donald Trump. There is nothing superior with the Kim Jong-un and the Kim family that gave birth to North Korea as we know it now. I think Kim Jong-un is the third generation. Kim, by the way, being the family's surname. They start with the surname Kim Jong-un, Kim what, Kim what, and then they hold it that way. It's like me saying I'm Mlotshwa Penwell, my brother's Mlotshwa Pensin. That's how they call it, the Kim family. They made those decisions. Vladimir Putin and anyone else, you can decide today. If you're Christian, Jesus Christ was born and he said, I am God's son, and he told people, believe in me and you shall have everlasting life. Prophet Muhammad came into the world and he said, I will live as Allah, which is the Arabic name for God. I will live as Allah prescribed, and I will be a role model for other Muslims to model against. The Jewish community would look to people like Abraham, look to people like Moses as their guides. There is nothing stopping you from saying, I know my history and I'm choosing to go in a certain way, and I'm sober and I'm clear-minded and clear-eyed in seeing where I'm going. And if anyone asks me why I'm going there when my people didn't do that, I can articulate that I know where I come from. Do not be mistaken and think that I'm confused. I'm not. You are also not confused by following those prescriptions. Where you may be confused is picking and choosing what suits you. And then at certain times, throwing away some of those things, but claiming that you are originally that when you're not anymore. And when the daughters rise up and they say they don't want to do this, you say, but that's not our culture. But then you're doing this. I wrote a post the other day and I got flack for it, and I was saying, when you compare the Zulu maidens to what we call the Muslim maidens, the Muslim girls are covered. You only see their eyes. It's beautiful. They cover their bodies, and it is only going to be their husband who gets to enjoy the purity of her body. I think that's dope. You are pure. No one has seen you. Only your husband will see you. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if the Zulus were to borrow this, to take from the Muslim or the Islamic community and say, we also now want Zulu maidens to cover themselves up, because we live in a modern world where the female body is hypersexualized. And to remove that, we are now going to say Zulu maidens are fully clothed. It is the Zulu women who are half naked who are no longer maidens. Now that you're married or you've had sex, now you can show your thighs and your legs. It should tell everyone, oh, that one is not a virgin anymore. The virgins you can see by how you can't even see anything that they have. And I was attacked. And it was like, but this is our culture. This is how it's always been. Don't sexualize the what. And I was like, this is interesting, because you're very quick to say we must preserve the Zulu maiden topless with her breasts out and with her bums out. But you have not preserved the Zulu man, because the Zulu men are not topless. They are not showing their legs or their bums when they go and see these maidens. They are dressed. Bagqoka ama-Brentwood, namakhavela. Bagqoka ama-golf shirt. They wear these so-called Zulu trousers and sandals. They've moved with the times. They're not there wearing just ibeshu and topless the same way the maidens are. But this becomes the hypocrisy, and I'm like, but how am I supposed to respect you when you have decided to evolve for what serves you, but you won't allow others to do the same? And these are the conversations we're meant to be having, and for us to have them, we need to understand our history. Ngicela ukubonga uZulu kaMalandela noShaka senza ngakhona, izwe lakaZulu, the rest of the Nguni Nation, and the Bantu people abala eAfrica at large. Pen you all the black pen, ipeni elimnyama.